And yes, welcome to, so yeah, I'm fiddling still with the computer because trying to figure all that out. So now we have a YouTube link and I'm going to tweet that out. All right, oops. Yes, all right. So hi there, everybody. Welcome to the 11th episode of Gutenberg Times Live Q&A. My name is Birgit Pauli Haag, and I'm the host and the curator of Gutenberg Times. Thank you all for watching. It's great to have you. Today, it's all about page building and Gutenberg Phase 2, and we have three phenomenal people for you who are working on the cutting edge of it. With me is Sarah Semark, product designer of Automattic and contributor on a few WordPress teams. Sarah James, lead UX designer at 10up, and also a researcher for page building or site building. And Mark Uraine, designer at Automattic and contributor to WordPress core. We do some proper introduction in less than a minute, but a little bit about the format today. Thank you for attending the show on Zoom and on YouTube. Please use the chat window to tell us where you're listening from. Where is everybody located? We are using the Zoom Q&A feature, and you can access this on the bottom of your screen. Also, you see a chat bubble. If you have a comment or something that you want to share with us, feel free to use it. We might not get over there right away, but we are watching this. We're also watching the YouTube chat section where you can post your questions. So where are you all from? Which part of the world are you? Okay, we have the chat window here. I'm kind of trying to figure this all out on my section here. Okay. So, oops, too many screens. All right, well, welcome from Petaluma, California. Montana, USA. Hi, Christine. Michelle is from Michigan, USA. Sacramento. Hi, Jackie. Well, howdy, Zach, Meg, and Ben. There are a lot of Californians here. Zach is watching from Washington and then from Oregon. So cold. Yes, I can see that. All right, let's get started with the speaker introduction. Start with Mark. Besides being a plugin and theme developer, you have been active to the core team, meta team, documentation team. Wow, seriously. But tell us about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do for fun? And what's your day job like these days?
Yeah, I'm in Southern California. So hi, all you Californians and others. For fun, I have a wife and 3 kids, all under the age of 7, or under the age of 11, actually, is my oldest. And they keep me very busy. The exploring the world through their eyes is fantastic. My day-to-day job is I'm a designer with Automattic, and right now my focus is Gutenberg Phase 2.
Okay. Not many people know this, but one of your annual tasks is working with Matt Mullenweg on the slide deck for the State of the Word. I use it regularly for inspiration for my own slide decks. Well, thank you.
That is a fun project. I look at it as an opportunity to work closer with Matt on something, which I really appreciate. And yeah, I've been involved with that since 2016. 2017, I just took a supporting role, and someone else led the design on that. And then last year I led it again, and it's an intense project. There's a whole group of people that really contribute to making that and pulling that all together.
That's interesting. Yeah, it takes a lot of work, even if it seems so effortless when Matt then finally produces it on stage.
He's good at that, right?
So, Sarah Semark, you have been in the WordPress community for a few years now and contributed on a few teams. Currently, you're working on the user research for page building in the Gutenberg Phase 2. And before we head first into that topic, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do for fun? And what's your day job?
So I live in Edinburgh in Scotland. What do I do for fun? I travel a lot. I like making stuff, so like physical things that do not involve me staring at a computer.
Mm-hmm.
I ride a motorcycle. I probably do other things. My day job is I work at Automattic. I do product design stuff, and right now I'm mostly focused on phase 2 of Gutenberg.
As well. So is the a research project that you do, is that part of the contribution from Automattic to, or your time for it to the project, or how do we understand this? Or is it something that you do on top of your work?
No, it's part of it.
Okay.
That would have been, I am not that giving of a person that I would be willing to do that much in my spare time.
Yeah, you don't have spare time now.
Well, I find day jobs tend to bleed into your spare time as it is. So this is a nice sort of confluence of things.
So, but it's a the research project or research team is a very young team. How can people get involved in the research efforts around the WordPress and especially Gutenberg phase 2?
So that's a great question that I don't have a 100% concrete answer to. The research efforts are sort of something new that's kicking off. There's not really a team so much as it is a group of people who are interested in research. And we'd like to be able to facilitate more people doing research studies. So as we worked on the study that we've just sort of finished, that site building study, we've been working on developing a toolkit of basically things that'll help make it easier to run your own research study. So checklists, guides for like how to create a research plan. I have a flowchart idea in my head for how to choose methodology that is not finished. But basically right now, what I'd really like to do is encourage more people to do research studies, whether that's usability testing or the sort of exploratory study that we did. And there's a Slack channel, it's called Research. So if anybody's interested in talking about research or doing their own study, or even looking into the data that we have, because we have a big database full of all the insights we collected from the site building study. The best way to get involved is pop in there and say hello.
All right. Well, thank you. And I know you're very welcome for any opinions there. At least you treat people very nicely. So it's a joy to join. So Sarah James, your passion is user-centric design, and you're also leading the research team with Sarah Semark. And to avoid confusion, you let me call you by your nickname, Sam. So Sam, tell us about yourself, where you live, what you do for fun, and what you're working on in your day job.
Great. Yeah, I'm Sarah James, she, her pronouns. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, so in the United States. Nice weather here today. So as I see Mark, I don't know if panelists can see everyone, but Mark's nodding his head. He knows that this area of the US is really nice this time of year. I also have kiddos. I have a 4-year-old son and 2 11-month-old twin boys. So when I am not working, I'm usually playing lots of Lego or other types of more kid-friendly toys. And just as Mark said, it's super fun to watch this age and see them learning. When I'm not doing that, I'm usually found brewing beer, reading a lot. I'm really a huge fan of Harry Potter. Might be kind of a typical thing to say, but I am a Potter nerd. And yeah, I work for 10up. We are a web shop that does everything. If we do strategy, engineering, user-centric design, user experience design, creating top class experiences all over the world. And one of our core values at 10up is being involved in the community, whether that is, we have a couple dedicated employees that's 100% what they do is they're working on WordPress core and they're making it better. We have lots of plugins that we put out to the community because we really believe in that open sourceness. And as a user experience designer, I was lucky enough to get more into how do we use user-centered design, user research, those kinds of things to make WordPress even better. And the way I originally got into that is I did unmoderated user testing of Gutenberg, but when it was a plugin, to see what people who have maybe never seen the interface would think and do and say with the experience. And that has cascaded to getting more time with the community and really working closely with Sarah and Mark on this project. So it's been really fun to be able to have that day job where I'm doing user experience design with 10up, but also being able to dedicate some time to the core team and core community and Automattic to really push forward user-centered design with phase 2.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, let's dive into the first part of it. Like every day, Mark, you publish an update about the progress of Gutenberg phase 2 on the Design Make blog. Can you walk us through the total scope of Gutenberg phase 2, just to kind of see the whole picture?
You bet. So phase 2 was really outlined by Matt in his 9 projects for 2019 post. And a handful of those pertain to Gutenberg specifically. And so we've kind of been working within those focus areas, we're calling them, to push Gutenberg forward. And those focus areas are widgets to blocks, which we're creating all core widgets and converting them into blocks right now. This will include using these blocks within the widget screen in the WP admin and also the customizer currently. And the other focus area is a navigation block. So creating a navigation block is very complex. There's a lot people could possibly do there or may not want to consider doing and have something a little bit easier. So that's being thought through a lot by Sarah Semark right now and Mel Choice and others that are contributing there. The other focus area is themes registering content areas in Gutenberg. So this will start replacing the current page templates basically with like block-based page templates. And that is going to happen a little bit later as more discussions keep happening on GitHub around that issue. The fourth focus area is tightening up, which we heard Matt mention in State of the Word. We really want to make Gutenberg shine. We want to polish it up and just make it an enjoyment and a delight to use. And that includes like block interaction consistencies, micro interactions like animations, and even really get accessibility inclusion in there. We're forming a great relationship right now with the accessibility team, and it's really bringing us forward, which I love. So feeding into all that is the research, which is why we're here today. This research, if everyone can please read it, because these things are driving a lot of our decisions forward. And it'd be great if everyone's on board and understands the reasons behind a lot of the choices we're making. Oh, you're on mute.
I wanted to kind of share some of the links, but I'll do it in a minute. So before we head into the research and have the Sarahs kind of take over this a little bit more, can you what are the early, after a month and a week kind of into Gutenberg phase 2, what are the early successes that you see and that you're excited about?
Yeah, there's been some great successes. Right now, research, like to have this generative or exploratory research to help feed into some of this stuff is fantastic. The second one I'd say is collaboration, like I mentioned with the accessibility team, API team. I know there's a lot of cross communication right now happening, and it's fantastic to see how well like the core editor Slack channel is doing right now. All those conversations are so productive that it's great to watch. Plus communication consistency, I'd add to that, is a great success. As long as we're maintaining a consistent communication platform where things are being shared among the community and the community knows what's happening and can contribute back to it, that's a success.
Awesome. And I'm going to share your latest update on the Gutenberg phase 2, which has a lot of links in there. and touches on most of those topics that you just mentioned on the YouTube channel as well as here on our chat. So people can go and read a lot about it. Well, thank you. I also know that Gutenberg 5.0 was released this week. And it has a few widgets already in there, like the RSS feed that seems to be a lot of people are excited about that, and some others great stuff. But you need to make sure for those who are listening. So Gutenberg is developed in the plugin first and then is integrated into core. Also released is the WordPress 5.1 release candidate 1, but when that version comes out finally in February 21st, it will have Gutenberg 4.8 with it, and not 5.0. So if you want to have the 5.0 goodies and shiny new objects, you need to kind of download the Gutenberg plugin and install it on your site. Just make sure that you're already on a WordPress 5 version. That's just kind of a PSA that I just figured out myself there can be some confusion there. So Sarah and Sam, you both are leading the research and how users do page building or better way site building. Why did you start this research project and why is it so important to be part of that process? What are the different pieces? Can you walk us through us for the various stages, Sarah?
Sure. So
well, a lot of questions, I know. Take it from the top.
my brain can only retain 3 things at a time, so
okay.
you're okay. I think that was 3.
Okay. You're really good. I only can retain 2 or 1.
So a lot of the rationale behind doing this was to better understand our users. The best way to understand your users is to talk to them. And as an introvert, I hate that. I would love if there were a way to understand users without talking to them, but there aren't really great ways. So talking to users is the best way to do it. And grounding the project in an understanding of end users. And end users aren't necessarily the people that you talk to in the community, because the community represents a very, very small slice of, the 30% of the internet that uses WordPress. The vast majority of people who use WordPress don't really know or care that it's an open source project or what that means. They just think of it as something to build a website. And so when we don't talk to them, we end up sort of assuming that everybody thinks the way we do, which is often wildly inaccurate because we have a very privileged understanding of technology because we are building it all the time. So I would say that would be sort of the primary reason for undertaking this kind of thing, to sort of gain an understanding of some of the end users who will actually be using the product in the end, so that we can empathize with them and think through product decisions from their perspective. I've definitely forgotten the second question already. I think you mentioned sort of the different pieces. It took a while because exploratory research can be kind of complicated because you're not exactly sure what you're looking for. And we also had a lot of people involved, but we started by planning it out, which meant lots of Word documents back and forth and comments back and forth. There are definitely 2 or 3 versions of the research plan that we did. So a lot of planning. Then we did some stakeholder chats, which is crazy because the stakeholders for an open source project like this are like the entire community. And Sarah can speak more to some of sort of collecting feedback from the community. And then we talked to people, we wrote a script, and we talked to 17 different people over the course of about a week and a half, I think. And then we crunched all the data, which was also a lengthy process. So basically taking all the notes and coding it and classifying it. And there are multiple giant databases full of bits of information. And then we just tried to make sense of it, which is the 5 posts that are going out on the Make Design blog now.
And Sarah, to add to that, part of the reason we started with learning more about the general way people look at websites, their vocabulary. We internally have a lot of jargon, right? We say a widget or a page builder, a block. We wanted to see how other people think of it so we could then apply that to design decisions and ideas. And one other thing, just to real quick step back, when we talk about user research here, some people think when you hear that word, you might think user testing or UAT or quality assurance testing. This wasn't us going and saying, here's the interface. Does it succeed or fail in these tests? Instead, it was a broader study of understanding behaviors and the way people view and use WordPress or any kind of content management system. And that's really a huge foundational piece to now what next and what to do. So I just wanted to add that little bit, that when we think of user research, this was, as Sarah said, talking to people, and it wasn't, here's task ABC, does this succeed or fail, which sure, that gives us some info, but it doesn't give us the information of, well, why, or what are your thoughts, or why did you choose the path that you did in this? So that was obviously fascinating for all of us to learn. You go into it thinking one thing, and then people start talking. You're like, oh, wow, that's totally different than anything I would have thought of. And I see everyone smiling. So there's kind of agreement there.
Yeah. Do you have an example for that from your own experience right now? That you say
the user testing we just did.
What surprised you, or?
I think one person in particular that we talked to that was in the blogger sphere, so really focused on their own blog. They actually had 5 different blogs. He and 3 co-writers used WordPress as almost their draft. They created a draft and would, I think, Sarah, if you remember, they would save it. So it wasn't just a preview or whatnot, but it was like they were writing a post back and forth. And instead of it being like a Word document or a Google Shared document or a Dropbox paper, they were actually using the WordPress interface to save and add comments and write this collaboratively. And I hadn't seen that workflow before, and that was fascinating to me.
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, I can see that. Yeah. Mark, do you want to add something to it?
It was a very good experience to see the people in their environment. Oftentimes we get to talk to them over video. And just watching them in their environment and how they talk about WordPress and their lives. Like, WordPress is a big part of their life in many cases. And so recognizing that, as Sam had mentioned, that they all kind of use it differently, or they have their own processes. And WordPress right now, we're going through some growing pains. We're evolving it a little bit. And we need to recognize that people have very stable processes on how they use it and what they use it for. So this research helps me personally understand that we need to communicate these changes, because eventually these changes will affect them. And we want to make sure that that is a positive experience for them. So.
And that's a great point, Mark. We did hear, all of us, when people would start talking about Gutenberg, their various different opinions, especially I really focused on that blogger. The people were really set in their ways, and they were so nervous to install 5.0 or even try the Gutenberg plugin, because they were like, I already know this. I don't want to relearn something. And that was kind of a pain point, but also a theme that we heard. I think, Sarah, you might have heard some of those types of comments too. We kind of all knew, like, okay, someone's going to say Gutenberg, get ready to play the drinking game.
One participant heard about the Gutenberg drinking game, and then when I made a weird face, she was like, yeah, no, I know you have a game with this, because you could tell when it was coming.
Yeah, so you were not the only ones working on it. And on the face of it, the number 17 seems to be very low, considering that there are millions and hundreds of millions, millions using WordPress. But and exploratory, so and but there's a lot of work involved. So there were these. You had I didn't count them, but a large amount of contributors doing the interviews, reviewing the videos, putting the data together. And then you published quite a bit about the project. So do you have some results and recommendation that you want to, or key takeaways, Sarah, that you want to share with us here?
So in terms of sort of findings from the talking to people part, I will be publishing today sort of the last part of our report, which includes findings, recommendations, and sort of an analysis of some of the themes that showed up. That is 90% ready to go. The biggest takeaways for me, I think, were that change is hard for people. As Mark and Sam mentioned, adapting to change is very difficult for people who have very ingrained ways of doing something and aren't interested in learning something new. So they really need to be, they need to have a good reason for learning something new. It needs to offer them something rather than just, this is going to be a better experience. They need a reason to invest the time in learning that, because they don't care about building a site. And I think when you work with technology for a living, you think, or tend to think, that people enjoy the process, but the vast majority of people just, they want to hire somebody to do it, but they can't afford to hire somebody to do it. So they're going to do it, but they're not going to enjoy it, and they want it to be over as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And that's I think so I shared on the chat the first post about the research, site building research with a background, and we're also preliminary key findings and recommendations, and I also shared it on YouTube. But you had some recommendations early in the process. Who should actually read those? Who was the target audience for? Just taking one of that from the post, kind of split themes into styles and templates, provide different paths for power users or beginners. Yeah, all these recommendations. Who were they meant to read? Who are the people your target audience for
that? Is everybody a cop-out answer?
Nope.
It absolutely is a cop-out answer. The recommendations are sort of purposefully high level. They are based solely on things that we sort of noticed in people, and things that we would suggest considering. And obviously, if any of those are things that people want to turn into product decisions, that is a much larger conversation that would probably merit more research and more understanding of sort of the problem spaces. The recommendations are intended to sort of act as guidelines for making product decisions, things to keep in mind as those decisions are happening, as we're working on sort of smaller components that make up the overall whole.
I'll even add to that not just core designers, developers, contributors should be reading this. If you're a plugin developer, this is great information for you.
I agree. But it's also probably a good idea to think who's reading it, and then for whom. Who are you building your product? And what I saw on your research on the following reports, that you divided up the user that you encountered into some groups, like the bloggers, the small business owner who builds the DIY business owner, build your own site kind of thing, and then the site builders, those who started as a blogger, but then build websites for other people. What are the main differences that you saw in those categories?
One was, I'll jump in real quick and Sarah can add some. A big one that I found is the way people discuss their vocabulary around it, but also the way they go about writing. So writing a post or doing a post. So for example, a lot of the bloggers would say, if I don't know how to do this, I'm going to Google it, or I'm going to look it up, or I have this ability to do it myself, versus the site builders have a different type of set of resources or a different way that they're viewing kind of technical problem statements and as such. So Sarah, I believe you can speak to this, that we didn't originally have this audience group. It happened to be that this is what shook out, is that after looking through it, we realized, oh, we're really talking to these segments of folks, and they have so many different aspects and personality traits and characteristics to the way they view this, that we want to separate them out to make sure no one's sort of missed.
Yeah, there was a great question on one of the posts. I think it was 4 or 3, I can't remember anymore, about how did we do the segmentation earlier today, which is a great question. And the answer is like, kind of guessed, which is not the most sciencey method, but segmenting people into sort of behavioral categories like that helps you to make generalizations about that group based on their sort of behaviors and how they use the product. One of the challenges with WordPress and with feeling like we know the users of WordPress is there are so many of them. And so, you know, not everybody is going to have the same set of needs, and a lot of those needs are going to conflict directly with one another. A small business likely has very different needs, and even ways of thinking about how they build a site than a blogger or an agency or a big publisher or something like that. So those categories sort of help us to make more generalizations, and from a small group of people, extrapolate an understanding of a bigger group of people, so we can build something that meets their needs or is tailored to them.
You look that you might have a comment, Mark.
I'm just in agreement with all those statements right there. It's some of the differences between the categories of, or the segmentation of users that we talked with are evident. Just definitely, like small businesses were very time concerned, right? They don't have very much time to do things, and just getting through a website. One person I talked to, not in the interview study group, but elsewhere, is like mentioned that WordPress is almost a barrier to getting your website out there. Any CMS is really a barrier that you kind of have to struggle through to get that website up. And when we think of it that, I never thought of it that way, that it could be a barrier. Here I'm thinking like, oh, WordPress, we're giving you all these tools, but it could be a barrier and a struggle for people. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I see this when I work with a few nonprofits. One nonprofit even said, well, you got to have a PhD to get work with WordPress. I don't think it was that hard, but she was very excited when I showed her Gutenberg and how easier it is to actually get some things done. But I wanted to go back to those generalizations. I think attempting generalizations, so a German writer says, okay, generalizations are always important and never right. But I think what it helps is that you actually identify the edges, that you say, okay, this is the ball that we know we have to deal with, but now let's look at the edges of things, and how can we make this also work for either edge cases or populations that don't use it that much. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that as well? Or how do you feel about that?
Go ahead, Sarah.
So.
I'm going to be really quick. I was just going to say that sounds a lot like I've heard it referred to as the mainstreams and the extremes, which I love because it rhymes, and we know that things are true when they rhyme. You want to design for the majority, but you also want to consider the edge cases. It's a great thing about when they designed, I think it was crash test dummies, and they designed for average height people, but nobody's of average height, right? And if you're very tall, and it's not going to work for you if you're very tall or very short. Accommodating for sort of those extremes helps a lot. So you sort of want a combination of both. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, mine was kind of a philosophical level too, which is as humans, we like to categorize. We like to understand what things are and put them in certain buckets. So it's an interesting researcher bias to both want to make sense of data in a way that you're organizing by patterns you see and different types of categories that you're looking at, without at the same time one's fitting into a certain sorry someone's sitting in a certain mold. I hope I was making a good hand gesture.
Right. Very expressive, yes.
Okay. And so it is interesting from a research bias is that you don't want to go in with assumptions, but then coming out of it, the purpose of categorizing is so you can make sense of all of this information that you've just discovered.
Totally. One of my favorite things through this is like my expectations just being blown out of the water by some user who's talking about it differently than I would have thought.
Yeah, it's very interesting to talk to some of the users. So what I really love about your publications was the two graphics that come with it when you talk about the different segments, like the blogger and the small business owner and the agency, or not the agency, the site builder, so to speak, the site implementer. You have first the journey and identified different roads or different stages on the journey, and then you have 4 categories, and then you had the pain points in a love it, hate it kind of diagram going through. Can you explain this a little bit more when people kind of read this, how to read those?
So first of all, I wanted to say Sarah and I had it was a morning for me, an evening for her, because we're about 8 hours difference, where we were sending graphic after graphic after image to say, should we think of it this way, or what about this, what about that? And what we ultimately realized is one thing that helped, again, organize the information in a way that helped sort of enlighten and consolidate what we studied is this task-based approach where people are thinking about things in certain tasks. They do this, then this, then this, and then next. And granted, the tasks can be sort of all over the place, of course, but what we saw was a pattern emerge of this linear. So when you're looking at something, when you're looking at that graphic and the link that was in there, examples just dropped in there, you're reading it left to right. You're looking at the tasks per that high level category, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath. And then the graph underneath is showing when we would hear different levels of pain points or delight when people were really excited or into it. So you'll see on some of them right away at the beginning, they're starting their website, they're really excited, but then they need to find a theme and it just tanks down. So being able to empathize with our users and create this user journey also allows us to find areas of friction where we can then design toward or make recommendations toward. We can say, oh, look at this little point. And to Sarah's point earlier, whether that becomes a product decision, that's a core product decision, or maybe someone who creates plugins or does themes or does something else in the community says, oh, here's an opportunity that I can make this better and make an experience be better rather than guessing at it. And yeah, I kind of think of the sort of the graphic graveyard that we had of all these different ones. And Sarah, big props to her to saying, no, this one makes sense. Let's kind of combine these and do it that way. And once we saw it, it just clicked and we said, yeah, this makes sense.
it's really helpful to have visuals as well. The sort of tricky thing about that is like we want the reports to be as accessible as possible, and putting text and images looks prettier, but it's not very accessible. So I'd actually like to go through those posts and put really long alt text on them. So they're a bit more accessible, but being able to see somebody's path through building a site and refer back to it in a visualization like that can really help, especially if you happen to be visually minded, which I am. Like an image is easier to understand than this much text.
Right.
Or a spreadsheet of 2,000 or 3,000 rows of data. You don't want to look, you guys, the people on the call, you didn't want to look at that. I mean, maybe you're really into it like we are, but that visual, it's a lot more.
Yeah, when I was looking at those graphics, what really jumped out at me is when different people think about content. So the blogger starts about very early with content, and then over the course of the journey, they try out different themes, how they fit their content. And a small business DIY owner has the content also up front, but they go right away into the tool selection, and then the theme, and then kind of building that out. It was very interesting to see. So props to your graphical design there, and selecting the right graphics. Yeah. So I'm looking at our Zoom Q&A, and it seems that nobody has questions. What is it? You're normally not that shy, people. Normally we'll have quite a few questions. So use the Q&A section there. I'm also looking over to the YouTube channel, and even there. Well, hi, Kevin. Hi, Felicia. No question there. Panel is very informative. I think so. Yes, it's a great conversation. I know that so when you are on Patreon, a patron of Gutenberg Times, you actually get first dip on a question. And I know Zach Gordon sent me a question for Mark. It's kind of gets a little bit off the topic, but what are the design best practices for Gutenberg plugins using the sidebar API? So how to design in a way that looks Gutenberg-like, or is it also, can we also do it custom, or is it just keeping vanilla and default WordPress looking? And he's here, so he might be able to elaborate a little bit or have a follow-up a question.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. The plugin sidebar is, so first, Gutenberg has like a handbook and design principles on the WordPress.org website, which are really helpful for guiding people who are developing or designing these things within Gutenberg. But the plugin sidebar essentially is a place where plugins can add some settings that aren't necessary or non-block related settings for the most part. So if you have some settings that affect the page as a whole or something like that, that's basically where those would go. Otherwise, a lot of the settings are very block based and would go inside of the block inspector sidebar. But I hope that's helpful.
Do you, so in the pre-Gutenberg world, there was this, every plugin kind of put their own settings in and had a different style and these kind of, so this is not happening on Gutenberg right now, because it's the accordion and whatever's in there follows the form of the Gutenberg team kind of laid out as a default. Are there ways to customize that? Or I think that was a question, maybe.
So definitely there's different things that can be done to customize. I think essentially like the interface elements are really, like it's important to follow the patterns that are being set forward by Gutenberg, especially in those sidebars and things. So I think that's important to do so that way users have a consistent interface that they can work with. And then however the block pans out, like however that affects the content on the page, I think is up to the plugin developers. ultimately when you preview a block and you see it within the editor, it's going to be styled differently, or however the developer or the theme might dictate that.
And Mark, to jump in and do a little jump of user testing and user experience and research, that's something that if you have a couple different ideas, there's a lot of ways you can quickly test that to see that that's moving more into the success or fail. Does this work here? Do people understand it, etc. So keep that in mind. We can help.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we have 3 questions, and we do them in order as they come in. So it's Taylor first, Ben, and then Felicia. So Taylor asked, has there been any consideration of longitudinal studies to see how new users progress to more experienced users? That's about the user research. Who wants to take it?
We have discussed, thanks for your question, Taylor. We have discussed having sort of more of that longitudinal studies. Sarah and Mark and I are sort of drinking from a fire hose right now as far as getting research and deciding what's kind of right now for phase 2 that's happening fast and furiously versus kind of longer form studies. Sarah, I can't recall if we've specifically discussed that versus kind of more it came up secondarily or not, but I think it's an excellent idea, of course.
So yeah, if it would be great to do a lot of different studies, and that's a great idea. And if that's something you're interested in doing, we have all these resources to help you.
Come join us, Taylor.
Nice segue. Yeah. So
partly what we want to encourage is for everybody to be doing research, right? It's not just a design thing; it's really an everybody thing. And it would be lovely if that happened more regularly across the project. And there's so much to explore that we haven't explored that picking something to dive into is sort of tricky. So it would definitely be great to see that happen.
So Ben Grace asks, is there anything that came out of your research that made you want to change how Gutenberg currently works? Or was there something that really surprised you that you didn't expect?
So thanks for the question, Ben. I did a lot of, so separate from this broader moderated user research that we did and spoke to 17 people, I have done a few other more usability kind of tests and studies. One was a quantitative survey that we sent out to, there was about 160 people responding. But another thing I did was the usability of the publish button to see if people understand this is where you publish. Would you expect a second screen? Because as you know, you click, says here's some other options, etc. And interestingly enough, everyone who was either intermediate or advanced in technology totally understood it, which is what I expected. When I went to beginners, the people who said that they have like beginning technical proficiency, they didn't understand. And I don't know if that was because they didn't know what a kind of CMS interface logged in state is, the WordPress interface logged in state. But most of the people, when we showed them a picture of the article, they clicked on the image in the article or the body copy and then assumed the article was published. So it was really, that was very surprising. And a little plug, I'm doing a write-up right now where I'm going to publish some of those findings, but that was just, why do you not know where publish is? It's a big button that says publish. Why would you click on someone's image? So that was one in particular for me that was a very specific example that kind of surprised me. Sarah, Mark, did you have any things in the moderated, et cetera, that sort of were surprising or make you want to change Gutenberg?
I think the big thing that I may have changed is how we rolled it out. Because I think the thing that really came up, like, again, we weren't evaluating the current state of Gutenberg. We didn't mention Gutenberg when we interviewed people. Most people did mention it, which is why it became a drinking game.
Cool.
It wasn't actually a drinking game. Anyway, I think a lot of what we heard from people was, I don't want to learn something new. I don't know why I should have learned something new. I don't know why we changed it. And people who were newer to WordPress are like, oh no, Gutenberg's great. Of course that's the way I'd want to do it. So I think the big sort of finding from there, if we could apply it retroactively, would be to sort of roll it out in a more incremental or more reversible kind of way, and to really explain to people what the value of upgrading would be.
So we have one question. We have 4 more questions. And Felicia Bettencourt asked on YouTube, will there be a Gutenberg block that creates a loop? For example, a block for the 10 most recent posts in category X. And I think there's something like that already in there. Mark?
We do have some blocks that display recent posts or latest posts. But if you're looking to try to grab some posts that target a specific category or tag, I don't believe that's part of the block right now, but that is a great extension. I know there are some other block developers that have built things like that. So
yeah, at 10up, we've had a lot of our clients request something very similar. So we know that is a feature request a lot of people are looking into. So certainly we've heard that comment.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good tightening up option for that.
Yeah. I know that there are plugins out there like the Atomic blocks who actually have a quite a nice post grid that you can plug into your posts or pages as a block. And I think there are some block suites or collection of blocks out there that actually pick up on that missing category, and then also the missing featured image to kind of pull that into the loop. Yeah. Atomic block is available and on the repository for free. So that is certainly a way for you to go, Felicia. Thank you for the question. Fabian from Germany, I was wondering whether the studies only cover the experience using, for example, the editor, or also the development of stuff for it as well. Thank you. I think what you're trying to say is it just a page editor, or is it also site building? And I think, yeah, that was actually the focus, right?
Yeah, we weren't actually evaluating Gutenberg. We actually talked to people who ran websites that were on Squarespace mostly as well, because we didn't want to just talk to WordPress users. So we didn't really evaluate the editor at all. We did a little bit of sort of looking over people's shoulders while they walked us through some stuff they did on their site. But it tended to be at a more high level, where it was more about sort of how they customize their site, how they think about it, what the regular tasks they do in their site are, and sort of what their flows for doing and accomplishing a task are.
Well, thank you. And we have a few more questions. So one from Anne, and then actually 2 from Marcus. Anne, do you think blocks will eventually make custom fields deprecated? Thanks, Anne. Mark, do you have an idea about that?
Thanks, Anne. That's a good question. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The blocks are very robust, or they can be very robust. You can do a lot there. One of the principles is that block is the interface and allows the user to really customize and set up a block for the need that they're looking for. So how that exactly integrates with custom fields, I'm not sure. I don't have a great answer for that one.
I think we will just see how far people can take it. So Marcus Moore has, I don't see a question mark in there, but I'm kind of will read his comments. So Marcus hates the tooltips. They seem to pop up all the time, even though I'm constantly exiting them. So it might be something to do with the cookies, if I'm not wrong about that. And then, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel that pain. I experience it. So, part of tightening up for phase 2 is to really kind of look at those tips again and revamp them in a way that maybe is more in line with what the user is actually doing and actually is helpful for when the user performs an action, that tip might come up during that flow to better inform the user rather than just saying, here's all the tips up front and as they cover interface elements.
Okay, well, thank you. The tooltips are also were thought about maybe that the plugin authors also could tap into that. I'm not so quite sure if that's a really good idea, but we will see how that comes out. Marcus also said, as a site builder, I'm really concerned about block locking. So we try to not use third-party blocks at this time, although they're really nice. So it's the old idea, okay, if I install a plugin and the plugin goes away, what happens with my content?
So we're trying to work with that. So with blocks, like, do you get the HTML version of that block then? If it's a dynamic block, that is if the plugin's like no longer there, right? But if it's a dynamic block and it's really relying on some dynamic elements, that could be a problem there.
Okay. So we have in the chat, I didn't look at that, but there are a few, how's your time? Shall we wrap it up or do we have time for 2 more questions?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Good.
So Jamie asks, what do you all see as the future for themes and template files in WordPress? I think that also goes back to your recommendation, separate the styles from the templates. Yeah. Sam, what do you think?
I was going to say, I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to know. I think there's so many iterations, and this is going to be, as Sarah said, kind of a cop-out, but there's so many iterations happening right now, and we're learning so much, and we're seeing how it's being used, that I think it's going to evolve in a way that whatever I predict right now is going to be totally different a year from now when we're looking back. So we should have this QA exactly a year from now to see what has changed and what is different. Yeah, I think it's hard to say, but I can say from what we did with the user testing is a lot of people don't think of templates like really that way. That wasn't a vocabulary we often heard unless it was the site builders, because again, that's the jargon, but the business and the bloggers really don't think of their site that way.
Mm-hmm. Any comments?
There's a lot of sort of conflict around themes as well, that not that the themes themselves aren't great, but perhaps the architecture that we have for them isn't matching the way that users think about building a site. So we saw a lot of people who said they spend tons of time trying to find a theme that works and they never can get it quite right, or they struggle to get it to look like the demo. And it's possible that some of that is because they like the styling of a theme, but they don't like the sort of layout and structure, or they like the structure or some of the functionalities even that are baked into themes, but they don't like the styling. And I think there's some sort of unnecessary conflict there that may be solvable.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that was sort of my mind-blowing moment is that this is sort of a duh statement, like I knew this, but to hear it was people already know their content. They know what they want to write. They know the types of things that they want on their site. So now they're trying to kind of square peg round hole, look for these themes. It's not like they look for the theme, they're like, oh, this is cool. Now I'm going to write a blog about recipes and cooking. Like, no, they have their content. So now they're trying to, if they don't have the agency or someone that can build something customizable for them, they're trying to plug and play with whatever they have. So that was a pain point that we heard.
And
so Mark, your prediction for future themes?
So I was going to comment that that while people have that comment or that content in mind, right? And with the classic editor, you were there and you were just going to write some content and add some images and photos. But now with Gutenberg, it's like you no longer are just doing content, you're doing layout with these pages. These blocks are about layout oftentimes. And so we've introduced something new. And in that way, we need to reevaluate how the whole system is working. We have blocks. Wouldn't it be cool if there were themes were providing these page block templates? And maybe that got surfaced in a way, because I would agree with Sam that these users, they may not think in template form, right? But they see a demo page and they kind of want it to look like the demo page. So maybe that theme provides a block template so that it's just plugged, like one click, bam, now I have a bunch of placeholders of blocks that are ready to go, and I just need to fill them in with content. So in a way, there is that separation, and I think that separation is going to be happening more.
More like a layout builder rather than a theme kind of thing. Yeah, I get it. So Ben has a comment, thoughts on what you think should happen with the post title block. Will that be filterable, changeable, removable for themes and plugins?
Yeah, great question, Ben. This is definitely something that we're looking at with phase 2, is how some of those blocks work better. As far as oftentimes people have a title, you have that title right for your page, but you may not want that title to be displayed on your home page. So how do you remove it? Right now, it's very interconnected with the post content screen. So we're looking at ways as we extend Gutenberg outside of the post content area, how we can pull that title block out or change it up so that it can be removed or hidden, or we'll see. A lot of discussion. There's discussion on GitHub for sure regarding that very fact.
So Doug had another suggestion for Felicia for the loop block, the ultimate add-ons for Gutenberg plugin, and the repository also has some solutions for that. So you got plenty of choices now. And also comments that the additional CSS field under the advanced tab is really, really helping her. And she likes it very much. Yeah, so I think that's all the time we have. We should, this is fabulous. Thank you so much. It was great fun, and I learned a ton about research and how to approach it, and how much work is actually behind all the reports that are that came out, Sarah and Sam, and the whole team there, and with Mark. And so if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to reach you? And do you have any announcements that you want our viewers and listeners to see, to know about? Sorry. Who wants to start? Sarah?
If people are interested in talking about research, there is a research channel in Slack. Does what it says on the tin. It's really quiet. We're very friendly, most of us. I was referring to myself in terms of being the unfriendly one. We really want to encourage more people to get involved in research, whether that's participating in existing research studies or running something of your own, or even just discussing it. And again, if you want to dive into the data that we have, it would be great having more people looking into that. You may well find things that we haven't seen. We're trying to make as much of the process and the results public as possible, while still sort of considering privacy concerns. Obviously, we don't want to reveal private user data, but we figured out a way around that. So if you want to talk about research, you want to run a research study, or if you just want to have a look at the stuff we've already done, come and join us in Slack.
And how can people reach you? There, obviously you're on Twitter.
I knew there was a second part of the question that I'd forgotten. There would be great. I'm in Slack as Sarah Monster, I'm fairly certain. Feel free to ping me. You could try mentioning me on Twitter, but I don't check it very often. So I would go with Slack.
Okay, how about you, Mark?
Yeah, so you can chat with me on Slack. My username is MapK. It's the Russian spelling of my name. Same thing on Twitter is MapK. So I do check Twitter and Slack often. I'm always there. Please drop me a line.
Well, thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I'm available on Slack. My 10up work email is just my name with a period in the middle, so sarah.james@10up.com. I am also available via Twitter at Apollo_UX. So any of those. And my one little plug is some of the conversations we were having about the quantitative data and surveys that we were doing. That's going to be published. I'm going to publish it on the Make WordPress Design side, but also at 10up.com. So there'll be both that publishing and also a lot of the information that people said when we asked what were lessons from phase 1, what do you want to refine in phase 2, what were some pain points of phase 2. There's so much information that I'm going to publish hopefully next week. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, so it will help to subscribe to the make.wordpress.org/design blog, because not only do you get all the information from those wonderful women leading that project and reporting on it, the research, but also where Mark publishes his updates to the Gutenberg phase 2. I'm so glad that you were able to come on a Friday into our show. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for your great questions. If you have more questions, you can always send them to me via email, Pauli, Pauli, @gutenbergtimes.com. The recording is available in a few minutes on the YouTube channel, just needs to render. And then we'll publish a transcript and the audio for the podcast later this month on the Gutenberg Times. The next Gutenberg Times live Q&A will be on March 8th. It will be something very special and close to my heart. I'm thrilled to have as guests Josepha Hayden, freshly announced or appointed executive director of the WordPress project. We have Daniel Bakuba, long-term contributor to WordPress core and release focus lead for the REST API in WordPress 5.0. And Jonathan Desroja, who's also a core committer and web developer at Bluehost. We will be talking about leading through change of Gutenberg, of course. Hope to see you all there, and bring a friend. You can already sign up for it, and I will put the link in the YouTube channel because the Zoom thing will go away after the meeting. The show is sponsored by Poly Systems and our generous patrons of Patreon. If you find our work valuable, you can become a patron too. Thanks again to Sarah, Mark, and Sam. It's been great fun, folks. You all stay warm, be well, and goodbye and good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.